Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be discussing political tribalism. And my guest, I have joining us from Philadelphia, Mr. Mohammed Sharif. Comrade, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
Joining us from right here in Atlanta, I have Carl family. Carl, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you for having me.
We have Josh Tule, who's joining us from Canada. He's a co-host on FOL program On Point. Mr. Josh Tule, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's nice being here.
We also want to welcome our democracy analyst who's joining us from Connecticut, Mr. Josiah F. Jokai. Joe, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis, as always.
Last but not least is our chief political analyst, aka CDC Pape, Mr. Wilmon Cooney. Mr. Cooney, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
I will not argue. Thank you for having me here.
No, if you can refuse, if you are not CDC Pape, you can say it, but that's how the people are calling you.
Okay. We respect the right of the people to hold their view.
That's it.
And the view of the people this time, we want to talk about two things happening in our country. And one of it is polarization. People are saying that our politics is polarized. We have some polarizing figures in our country. And so we're going to be discussing polarization. By definition, someone defines polarization as division into sharply contrasting groups or set of opinions or beliefs. If you go into science, when they say polarity, meaning, opposite. So polarizing. So we're going to be talking about the polarization of our politics and how that is deeply rooted in what we call the political tribalism. That is where the loyalty to the political tribe, it could be an ethnic group, it could be a political party, it could be a region, it could be anything, it could be a class. That political tribe, that loyalty is more important than the loyalty to anything else. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking polarization. Do you believe the Liberian politics today is polarized? Why or why not? Let me start with George.
It's always been like this. I like to go back into the history of Liberia. When independence was declared in Liberia, it was 3,000 people that declared independence, excluding the rest of the country, the rest of the people that met there. Even though it wasn't declared Liberia with the geographical defines that we know today, but it was still a country that was declared. I mean, independence that was declared. And it was only declared for a few, excluding the majority. And it has been like that so all through the 100 plus years of the Tribal Party. In fact, when you look at even the death of Ejiro, it was the ruling elite who were fair-skinned, who felt that a dark man who was an outsider became president, and they sought how to remove him. So they removed him, all right, and they came back. And then the TWP, who were the offshoot of the Ejiro group, reclaimed government, and they stayed there for 100 plus years until they were overthrown in 1980, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, about 100 years, and they were overthrown in 1980. And the thing is, even when they were there, they ran the country exclusively for the few. So they're not only one political system we had, and even with that, we know about the vagrancy laws that they enacted, where people from my great great grandfather, came from would come from Adenton to sell his food or his agriculture produce, and he had to leave Monrovia before 6 o'clock, otherwise he would be arrested. And went to my grandfather and everything. So I'm just saying that there's always been a nation with cleavages. So our politics is not divorced from that fact. Even our politics, there are cleavages within our political realm. When TWP left and NDPL came, or the PRC before the NDPL, they still ran it for only a few. And when Chancellor came, the same thing too. It's like when Ellen came, it became the same way. So it's always like this: the ruling and then the opposition is split on those ends, and it's so bad that the ruling has this winner takes all mentality, and that so Liberia is a very divided, polarized country. All our opinions are starkly contrasting from each other. We hold different ends of the spectrum, and that's how I see Liberia.
Thank you, Josiah.
Right. Sure. Our politics is seriously polarized, and they did not just happen in vacuum. I think the historical perspective that George was talking about has to also be taken seriously. When you were given the definition of polarization and you made reference to science, another simple form of relating it to our political situation is the issue of divergence. Basically, there is this serious divergence in views, in opinions, in deeds, in the way we approach our politics in our country. Other people are strongly inclined to their tribal group to which they belong, and they don't see anything wrong with it. If even people are not the best options for the country, they don't care. They support them. Don't forget, way back the slogan, "Native woman born soldier, soldier killed turbo." So that is a classic example to tell you the polarization of our politics, the divide that existed between the country and Congo scenarios that we still have in the country. That is something that is difficult to go away easily, because that has been the chief division in our political system. And that polarization has not gone away easily. It cuts across our political spectrum. So the whole Congo idea came as a result of the birth of the country, the way it was birthed, the way our independence happened, and the way one group of people in the TWP remained committed to their ideals and held onto power for 133 years at the disadvantage of those that they met in the country. That's what polarization also tells you, that in fact is the difference between the rich and the poor. If you go further to look at the definition, the divergence of beliefs between those two groups of people. And if you take our country, for example, our political system, our social existence, there is a great divide. And so views are so different, so polarized. Our rhetoric is so divisive and is based on these inclinations. People to their different groupings. The Congo people remain committed. They come back to reclaim. They believe that country people, yes, should not be at the helm of power in the country. That's the kind of thing. I'm not saying it as an individual from an individual perspective, but that's the kind of thing we've observed in our political system.
It's time to talk tough. Go ahead.
And it's real. And it's real. So yes, our politics is polarized.
Let me go to Carl. Carl, what are some of the issues we are polarized over, if you believe that our politics is polarized?
Yeah, I mean, polarization assumes two positions, right? So anytime you hear the word polarizing, you're talking about 2 points, two opposite or two, diametrically opposed points.
Right.
And that is not very accurate when doing an analysis of Liberia, because this is not a group of homogenous native people that were here versus a group of homogenous repatriated Africans who came, right? So I think it's just overly simplistic. One of the things that I really appreciate about Liberian history that's profoundly unique in Africa, even compared to Sierra Leone, profoundly unique, is that there were multiple nations that were at odds, that were at war, that had history of clashes existing in the Grain Coast prior to the ACS and the repatriated Americans coming back to their ancestral homes. This is important to note because we talk about tribalism and we talk about it kind of arbitrarily. And also, we also talk about native people in one homogenous group. That is not a thing. There's no such thing as native. We had many wars historically over land, over territory, long before we ever encountered anybody called Lot Carey or any of these people. So those divides re-emerged during our Civil War. They didn't come from thin air. Those are old historical rifts that existed here before modern, or not modern, but westernization entered into our culture. Secondly, the people that we call Kunga, I mean, that's just a really it's a inaccurate term, right? So you have Americo-Liberians who are the descendants of the repatriated descendants of American slaves. You also have Caribbean people. There's a large number of people that came from Barbados, completely different cultural orientation. Their experience with slavery was different than the people of North America. They were more skilled, more educated, more free than the people who came from North America. You also had a group of mulattoes who came from North America who were elitists. They were usually the biological children of their mother's owners. And so when the father would die, he would then, give them a lot of resources and send them to Liberia so that they could come back and rule over, whoever. So even among this group of people we call Kunga, there's a lot of diversity. The largest number that comprise this group we call Kunga are not actually from the Americas at all. The largest number of the people we call Kunga are actually rescued captives that never made it to the New World. The majority of these people are from places along the Congo Basin. That's why they're called Congo. And majority of the people we call Kunga are coming from that group. Some of them are also native to the Grain Coast who were adopted or voluntarily joined the Republic very early on in the 19th century, became Christians, spoke English, got English names, and they're no longer Bassa, they're no longer Kru, they're no longer Gribble, and people don't even know that their ancestry was right here on the Grain Coast. That's very important. And it's important to have that layered history. So we're not polarized, we're diverse. We have completely different cultural backgrounds. We have completely different experiences. And that diversity is also our power and it's our weakness, because only if we don't know and understand it, if we don't have a proper appreciation for our diversity and our history, then you start to see these conflicts. There needs to be a curriculum. One last thing, there needs to be a curriculum and a focus on oneness and unity. And that's only done through telling the truth and presenting all sides of all stories.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif, today we found out that almost all our discussions are along the lines of either being pro-government or opposition. I mean, as Carl said, this is not a homogeneous group, but we found out that our discussions are always, even people watching us now, all they are looking for, is it CDC or is it opposition? That's polarization. Will you agree?
Let me just again thank you for having me here, and I want to say shout out to students at the Waplo Institute as a distinguished alumni from Waplo Institute. I want to make it clear that I represent that great institution. So when you talk about polarization, I like to push back on the notion that, Liberia is, the Liberian political atmosphere is polarized. Partisan, yes. Polarized, not so much. So let's take the United States, right? So you have gun rights versus gun control. You have free trade versus protectionism. You have, groups who support affirmative action, and you have those who do not support affirmative action. So when these issues are debated in the halls of Congress, you have sides who are very hardened on one side or the other. They will not budge, right? So That's how I understand, and that's the context within which, right, polarization should be understood, right? In Liberia, what you have are individuals or group of political parties that basically agree on the same thing. So you don't have a gap of ideological division. What you have are individuals who, my brother wants to be president, so I'm voting for my brother, right? But what is my brother going to bring to the table that's different from the current president? What is my brother? And this is just an example, full disclosure, I don't have a brother who's running, right? So my brother's running, right? So, okay, what is he going to bring to the table that's different from George Weah? What is he going to bring to the table that's different from Samuel Doe, that's different from William Colbert? Those are the kind of things that you don't see in Liberia. So what you see are individuals, political parties who basically agree, right? There is not a lot of ideological differences. So you don't have, for example, we disagree on, the type of educational instructions to dispense to our children. You don't have that. They all agree on one thing, right? They all agree on the same things. They all agree on, I would say, arguably, they all agree on corruption, right? They all agree that, government exists to be corrupt, even if they don't tell us. But, these guys are all, for the most part, corrupt. And so the next administration that's coming in, they're not giving us any blueprint, but they're not going to be the same as the current regime, as the current administration. So in that sense, there is, very limited. If there is any political polarization, there's very limited. So finally, let me go back to, early Liberian history, if I may. So, you had the administration party, you had the anti-administration party, right? So those were partisans, those are political parties of different different viewpoints. They didn't have different ideologies. They all believe in the free market system. They all believe that Liberia was founded by returnees who made that country their home. So they all believe in very, very similar way of running government. So there was no differences in terms of that. Now, 2 decades later, Edward James Roy comes along, as one of the panelists was saying earlier, came along, and he became the leader or the founder of the True Wheat Party that led Liberia for over 100 years. So there has always been a unanimity of ideology in terms of what Liberians think the way the country should be governed.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney, Mr. Sharif strike a very important point about partisanship and polarization. Where are we when it comes to Liberia? Are we being partisan, or are we the politics is polarized, or both? You're on mute. If you can unmute yourself, go ahead.
Well, I tend to agree. I'm not muted.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Brother Sherry hit the nail on the head. Political polarization, is actually viewed in terms of extreme divergent political ideologies. And as he rightly said, all of our political parties are not granting any ideology that may want to be different from the other. What we've always had in our country, Brother Dennis, is a little mixture of partisanship and more of a tribal politics. That's what we've always had in our country. We can even say our politics is driven by partisanship, because even in partisanship, you have partisans of the party being motivated by the policies of the party. They're being motivated by the visions of the party. If you were to take any of our people and ask them what's the policy, for example, what's the policy of the CDC, what's the policy of the Unity Party, I mean, what policies these parties set that you're fighting for? What's the policy of the Liberty Party? What's the policy of the ALP? What are these policies that motivate you to be a member of this party that you are fighting for? Almost all of them will not be able to tell you the policies of those parties. So, to the extent that they belong to the party, it's a little bit of partisanship. But what we have more and what we've had historically is the tribal nature of our politics. Even from the time the settlers landed in Liberia, the tribal nature of the politics took over. And going forward, it is the same thing. That it is that tribal environment that we've always discussed our politics. The difference is that what is happening now is that that tribal environment has expanded. It is not a traditional country Congo again. Now you have the elite versus the non-elite. You have now the moral politicians that want to maintain their dominance on the rest of the country. And you have all of these factors going on. So the politics is driven not by a different ideology, it's driven by the fact that this government is in power. And, we got to move that government and replace that government. Nobody is bringing anything new. We're not having bold proposals on the structure of governance that we'll be having in the country. Everybody wants to inherit that centralized power structure in our country so that they can prey on the rest of the country. So they can prey on our people in the interior, so that they can go collect all the revenue from the interior, bring it to Monrovia, and buy their big cars and live their big life. There is no fundamental change. There is no fundamental policy that each of these parties bringing forward for us to look at the structure of governance in our country. So it is that tribal thing that is driving it, be it ethnic tribalism, be it social tribalism, this elite tribalism, academic tribalism. Now we got a new component, diaspora tribalism. This is what's driving our politics right now. So in that situation, there are a lot of ideas. There are a lot of ideas in the political space. So that's why you find the participation is more party-based. It's more party-based. And even the parties that we support, we don't even know the policies of these parties. We don't know the policies of these parties. But in terms of polarization, our politics are not developed to the point where we will talk about polarization that will be driven by ideologies of political institutions, that will be driven by ideologies of political organizations. Like the brother said, we're not talking about somebody who believes in small government and somebody who believes in big government. Our politics has not reached that level.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Focus on Liberia, and we are on Tough Talking Thursday. So let's talk tough now. Now we have, and let me go to you first, Call. We have opposition versus CDC or versus government. Before the little or what looked like the primary in the CPP, everything was you either pro-government or anti-government, just like the two parties we had before. And nobody even cared, what you were saying. As long as you were opposition, every opposition person will back you. As long as you were pro-government, every pro-government person will be cheering for you no matter what. It may not be based on ideology, but is that not polarization? Or how do you really look at this pro-government and anti-government divide? And you can call names if any comes to mind.
Thank you for this program. I think it's so necessary, and the idea that we don't have an ideological divide is not 100% accurate, because even in early Liberia there was, Liberia Pan-Africanism, the idea of uniting African people was born in Liberia. you know, with Hillary Teague and later on Biden and others. And they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by the people who wanted to be obedient to the global superpowers at the time. And they were sabotaged and fought and defeated for the most part. Fortunately for us, these men were literate and they documented their ideas, they documented their dreams for Liberia. The spirit of oneness of Africans uniting based on basically for our survival. They knew that the only way that we would survive is if we suspended our tribal identity and embraced one another based on our common ancestry as Africans. And that ideology has been passed down from generation to generation in small pockets. You've got Moja, you've got these people that call themselves progressives. You do have an element of very strong principled ideological Liberians who believe in the state, the fundamental purpose for which the state was created. Neither of the people who are currently looking to get into power on a serious note, including the coalition political parties, nor the existing CDC understand any of this, or at least they don't articulate it, right? So you will never hear anyone saying anything good about Liberian history because either they're not aware of it or they don't believe in it ideologically. So for someone like me, it's the front. You know, most of the people running for office in Liberia, like Mohammed correctly said, they all agree on the same mediocre, sub-mediocre, not even mediocre, it's the sub-mediocrity. They don't, they have this espouse on one side of their face socialist ideas, they espouse on the other side of their face things that don't make any sense, diametrically opposed concepts in the same speech because they don't believe in anything. All they want to do is take power. And so I'm extremely disappointed in the opposition of today. And I was also disappointed in the opposition when Ellen was president. This lack of thought, this lack of depth, this lack of understanding. How can you run for president of a country on the basis that you don't like the country's constitution? How dare you? That could never happen in any country in the world. I don't care how backward it is. Where you want to run for president and you're condemning the constitution of the country that you're going to have to swear to uphold when you take office. But nobody questions that.
Right.
Because of the lack of education. Right now, if you ask George Weah, if you ask Joseph Boykai, if you ask Alex Cummings, do you believe in the concept of a Black republic? They will all say no. They will all say no. Because they don't understand the context in which Liberia was established. You can never ask an Israeli Jew if they believe in a Jewish state and they're running for president of Israel or prime minister of Israel and they say, no, I don't believe in a Jewish state. But Liberia, Israel was modeled off of the sovereign need for there to be an asylum for oppressed people, which Liberia was the example set to create Israel. And you will never hear a Jew condemn the purpose for which Israel was established, but you hear Liberians condemning the purpose for which Liberia was established. It makes no sense.
So Cole, now we are at a point that people just follow, either you follow government or you follow opposition.
Exactly, because they don't have anything to think about. There's nothing, all they know is they want jobs, they're hungry. Nobody's educated properly to think of themselves as citizens. The civic education has failed. So when people get involved in politics, it has nothing to do with ideology. The government is the only job creator. They want to side with the government so they can get jobs. They don't even understand the country that they're citizens of. So the conversation we're having, I mean, it's painful for me to even have this conversation because we have to face the reality, which is that it's a joke, it's a facade. Everyone running for office, they're trying to get into power and they're trying to get their people into power so they can get jobs. It's not about any fundamental cause of establishing our sovereignty, alleviating poverty through uplifting the citizens of the country and empowering them. You hear people running for office talking about, oh, we need to be able to give our land resources to other people to invest in. who does that in the 21st century instead of talking about empowering Liberians to take advantage of the resources that have been through suffering passed down to us through generations. We're not appreciative of the fact that 100% of our land still belongs to us in this day and age where we're so much more educated than our ancestors. Instead of us looking at ways that we can exploit our resources, we're still sitting here looking to elect people who think some guy needs to come from Europe or Asia or the United States to exploit our resources for us. It's sickening.
Thank you. Mr. Tule, you are a member of the Liberty Party, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel that right now in Liberia is you either opposition or you pro-government? There's no middle ground. Is that what we've come to, or how bad is it?
It's been like that from day one, and we go back, and we said, I think somebody raised the issue of people. I think it was Mohammed.
Hold on, Mr. Kuni. There's you keep going in and out. What's going on with your connection?
I don't know. I'm sitting here. It just keep kicking me in and out. So,
all right.
Maybe that's some technological problem I'm not aware of.
Right. Okay. You think the government had anything to do with it?
Dennis, stop, man.
Okay.
I suspecting George.
Okay.
Yeah. The usual culprit.
Go ahead, Mr. Tule.
I'm the usual culprit. Anyways, let me say something. I supported Liberty Party, always have. I was there from the very founding of the party. And the reason why I supported Charles Bromsky because he was a man who espoused ideologies. He had articulated views on what he wanted to see Liberia become. And we were talking earlier about the issue of the imperial presidency. Charles Bromsky kicked against that every day and said that if he became president, people will be independent. Counties will be run independent from the presidency. So if we have to find the money to fund elections, then we'll have to do that. Where am I going with this? When a man has ideas, when a man has a vision, it consumes him. Okay? If he enters the political sphere and he wants to get something done, everything that he is consumed by this ideology. This is what I'm about. This is what I want to see for my people. If you ask or Kagame to talk right now, Josiah, the third thing, but before he can get to his third sentence, you will see that his ideology permeates everything that he enunciates. Yeah. Everything that he discusses comes out of what he is, and he lives, he drinks, he eats what he wants to see translated in the lives of his people. You can't get anything else. If you would go back to Rawlings when he was alive and president of his country, if you shock Rawlings, all he would talk about to see was the dreams that he had for his nation. Unfortunately, every one of you who have gone before me were partly right in certain ways. Everyone that have, since we left from Taylor to Madam Salif to the present dispensation, our leader, I was there. I went to all the debates. Every time Madam Salif appeared, I was there. None of them espouse any real dream for Liberia. This is what I want to see with education. This is what I want to see with healthcare. This is what I want to see with security. This is what I want to see with agriculture. These are the things, these are the measures, these are the steps we're going to take. And because of that, Kou will bear me witness. Manasali was president for 12 years. There were some things that were not done. One of the things, how can we have a nation without a typical example? Monrovia doesn't have a solid waste treatment plant. A whole country, a whole nation, Liberia, we don't have one with 4 million people. We don't have one waste treatment plant in Liberia. One functional waste treatment plant in Liberia. Just think about how, when I think about it, it sends me crazy. You understand what I'm saying? And a president who, or leader who knows what's supposed to be done, will think holistically, will be a walking thinker. Every aspect of life in Liberia will be something the person will already be thinking about before somebody come and say, "Boss, let's do this." Say, "Yes, I already got this plan written down." Let me go somewhere. Let me go specific with you. When I supported this man in 2005, Gus Jarrett, Baron Tar, few other names I won't call here. Myself, Morris, we will sit nights because everything Bronsky said he wanted to accomplish, we had to sit down and determine how will it be accomplished. And we wrote it down, and it's still existing today. Everything. If you wanted, he said he wanted, the first thing he said, if I become president, I will have mobile clinics all across Liberia. We had to come up with how would the mobile clinic, where the personnel would come from, how would they be paid, where would they be stationed, how would the vehicles be taken care of, and everything you can think about. Every bit of it we had to sit. And good thing is, Dr. Barata, I will tell you the truth, that man was a genius. That man, he wouldn't forget any little detail. He was very detail oriented. So we sat down, we brought about the Liberty Party policy or platform, and we presented it. Okay, before you come in, let me just say this. The reason why, with all polarization, the reason why we're not doing anything as a nation is because we do not, like Mohammed said, like Kou said, we do not follow people who for the ideas that they espouse. What we follow people for maybe their popularity or for their tribal leanings, which subdivision they come from, and that's why we are lagging behind. It frustrates me to have this conversation, to be honest with you. A whole country doesn't have a waste management plan. The entire Monrovia, you see what I saw. All the waste,
the toilet
goes into either the Do River or the Atlantic Ocean untreated. It's a crime.
Thank you.
It's a national crime.
Joe, you're probably the only one who ran for office in Liberia. Right, and on the platform now. So, and we're talking about the entire country now being divided between opposition and pro-government. And that name, in fact, somebody said, it's only in maybe developing country hear opposition. If you come here, you don't hear Republican, Democrat. But then when you go to our place, they say opposition. So now we have opposition and government. No matter what you say, in fact, people watch me. Some will say, "Oh, this guy is CDC." The other day they come, they say he's opposition. So this binary thinking. What is the history of it, and how bad or good it is it now when it comes to today's politics?
Sure. Like you rightfully said, I contested the seat in the House of Representatives for District Number 3 in Montserrat County in the 2017 elections. I did not win, but it was an interesting experience. People are now still interested in the conversation about addressing issues based on policy approach, trying to use the public policy approach in formulating policies such as the how, the who, and the why questions to address them, like Tule was just talking about the waste management situation. You have nothing like that. That's not what politicians are interested in. Political parties are largely interested in. The goal is to capture state power and to be able to address their personal needs. That has been a long-standing issue in Liberia. It's not just about now. And I think it's not going to go away easily if our mindset doesn't change, and a revolution in terms of enlightenment of the minds of the people and the nation about their own history and what the realities are about governance and what needs to be done. Having said that, let me also add that
before you continue, one reason is either the chicken or the egg quandary here. The people are not interested in hearing the politician talk about policies, or the politicians are not talking about policy. What's happening?
the situation has been created in such a way that you have a good number of the voters who are extremely poor by definition, and they look up to many of these people for handouts. And so it is now about the policy conversation that draft them to vote for people who contest these positions largely. My own experience tells me that. The other part of it is that the politicians also, they know certainly the language that people want to hear, the big things beyond the policy issues. I will do this for you. I will do that for you without the how, why, and who questions. Like I said, from a policy perspective, it's not about addressing the educational needs of the people that everyone in the community will benefit from. That's not what a politician is interested in, realistically, about the health issue, hygiene and sanitation, like George was talking about. The politicians equally are not largely interested in that. Even if they talk about it, it's not realistic. It's not even profound to be able to define who's going to be involved, how they're going to lay it out, how implementation is going to be, how do we formulate such policy. No, they don't embark on those kinds of campaigns easily. What they embark on is what the voters want to hear for the immediate term that can give them the power that they seek. So the point I was trying to talk about, polarization from the initial stage, has to do with the intensity of the divergence in views. It's not necessarily about policy. We all know that everyone talks the same thing. In fact, many of the campaigns are characterized by slogans, not policy issues in our country. It's not based on policy. We are aware of that. But when we're talking polarization in our highly tribalistic body politic, we are talking about the way we engage with it, our deeds, the way people cleave to political parties based on tribal connections. It could be the social structure, it could be the political party, it could be just something as ethnicity, but it's not based on any real policy difference. That's not the cause, the axis upon which they have the conversation, the difference in policy, but intensity of the conversation and how extreme they go brings about some level of polarization. But if you also want to talk about difference in policy, if you look at the True Party, for example, up to the point of Turbo, you saw that he moved away from the entrenched True Party inclination to Western to the Western world when it comes to foreign policy. That was a divergence of view. That was divergence of opinion. That was divergence of policy, major as far as the True Party arrangement was concerned. And that also helped to bring about the downfall of Turbo when he turned to the east. So that was a divergence, and that was polarization of the politics at the time. Though it was inside the True Party, but it had a direct impact on our national politics, because see what happened. He got killed, he was overthrown, and see the understanding of the other side of the divide, you know, and you kept hearing the slogan I told you initially about Native Woman Born, so they killed Turbo. So I do agree to some extent when it comes to understanding our history, about how we got established, about how we had repatriated Africans coming back to establish, you know, our country, and they came from other places like the Caribbean, and those who were brought back from unsea did not even make it across the Atlantic. But the fact is that they were all characterized under one umbrella. So in Liberia, if you want to easily understand those group of people, the language that people speak is country Congo. So that's for the sake of the conversation. And I can tell you that divide stays there, whether or not the intensity brings us to the point of polarization, but it is a conversation that we can't just do away with easily.
Thank you. And that will lead us, because the time, we spent a little more time than I anticipated. So we'll go into our second segment, which is political tribalism. And
Dennis, before we move on to the second, can I just make a 10-second statement?
No. We have Kuni and Mohammed.
Yeah, no, this is not. I'm not looking for a whole segment. I just wanted to make a very profound statement. Please, just give me 1 second.
The profound is not in the second, though.
Yeah. What I wanted to say is this: if we were voting on ideological or visionary basis in Liberia, we would not be looking at the two front runners in the opposition, or even the present president in 2023. We'll look for somebody who espouses view different from the norm. That's
Okay.
all I wanted to say. And just to
Yeah,
show
just a
you,
Mr.
classic
Cooney,
example.
Mr. Cooney, let's look at our current political slate. We have the incumbent, President Weah. We have the two forerunners in the opposition CPP, Mr. Boakai and Mr. Cummings. Talk to me about polarization or the lack of ideas or policies, ideology when it comes to the three contenders for the presidency. I know there are more. Let's put this in context now when it
Let
comes to
me
our
start
forerunners.
yeah. So let me start by addressing the question this way. There are a few issues that I found fundamental to the Liberian political process, and as I said, central to my advocacy is this whole question of decentralization of governance. I'm not talking about expansion of central government activities. I'm not talking about the creation of colonial posts to collect government revenue and bring the money to Monrovia. I'm talking about actual decentralization where our people are empowered to work for their own self-governance. This is very crucial to me. The predatory state that we have in Liberia has to stop. Politicians based in Monrovia cannot continue to prey on the rest of the country, collect all the resources of the country, and sit down in Monrovia and divide the resources of the country to the exclusion of our people.
That is true. Relate that to
So
President Weah, Walker, and Cummings.
Dennis, give me a chance. Let me learn. I'm laying my premise. Then the second thing is the kind of fluid electoral system we have in our country, where the election laws are such that Wemo Kuni, Dennis Jar, George Tule, any of us can become presidential candidate at any minute, with no other way to decipher, to kind of streamline the list to the point where every time we have 23 candidates. A simple thing like that can be ratified by legislative enactment, maybe requiring a ballot requirement, maybe requiring candidates to meet a certain threshold to get on presidential ballot. I'm laying these points to tell you that, Dennis, none of our political leaders are pushing these things. That is the disappointing part about it. The current government is not pushing it, the opposition not pushing it. And this is why I keep saying, all they after is they just want to exchange, be in this revolving door. And this revolving door has not helped Liberia. The analogy I create is the bakery. You have this bakery, no matter who you put there, whether this baker is educated, whether this baker got bakery training or not, the bread is coming from the bakery bag. The current system of government we have is not helping the country. The overly centralized government we have is not helping. Where are the political parties platform on that? What is the current government doing on that to decentralize authority? I applaud some of the things the government doing, building rural housing in some of the counties, but I would have loved to see those things, those initiatives being undertaken by local authorities who know their local condition and know how to exercise control over local resources. This whole idea that before we even build a road in Kabada, the instruction that will come from Monrovia is appalling. We have to change that kind of political system in our country. And we're not seeing it coming from anywhere. Not from the current government, not from the opposition. All they want to do is swap the imperial presidency.
Thank you. The situation looks
really
Mohammed, where is this problem coming from? Is it that the voters are not demanding it, or the politicians not providing it? I mean, where do we start from?
Excellent question. So where do we start? So when you look at Liberia, Liberia is very unique in terms of something you have on the outline of discussion for today, which is tribal politics. So a very rich country, resource in terms of natural resources and what have you. And yet, Liberia is counted among the poorest countries in the world. Why is that? Um, our infatuation, our obsession with tribalism is, beyond anything that I have ever seen. So you go to Sierra Leone, right? What you have are different ethnic groups who are in government. You have the Fula, you have the Susu Mandingos, the Mendes, and the Limbas and the Creoles, and all of these ethnic groups combined. Um, you know, they all work in government, and most are in the private sector. You don't have those kinds of issues. I brought up the situation where I was going through Sierra Leone during the Civil War, and we stopped in a town called Mumbai, and the court section was, the court was about to commence, and the judge entered the room, and both religious leaders were given time to, the Christian pastor was given, opportunity to say the Lord's Prayer, and the Muslim religious leader was given time to say, the beginning of the Holy Quran is called Al-Fatih. So when they say Al-Fatih, so anything that we do as Muslims, the first thing you do, you read Al-Fatih, which is the opening surah in the Holy Quran. So
did they give time to the traditional African belief? Guys?
I know I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. But but you understand that that in itself is a level of development that you don't see in Liberia. So what you have in Liberia now is we are so divided. So the history of Liberia tells us that there are 16 ethnic groups, but in those ethnic groups you even have divisions.
Right.
So you have.
I hate to interrupt you, but if we were to fix this,
yes,
will we fix it from the leadership perspective or from the people who are voting? Should we have people demanding for policies and plans and things? Because it's the politicians are telling me they are giving the people what they want. Because if they go to run their campaigns and they are talking about how they're going to enact laws, nobody's going to vote for them. So they're going to talk about building roads and building bridges. They, in essence, they lie just to get the vote. So where should the pressure come from?
So if you're asking me quickly for a solution, and what I'm going to say to you is that the first area that I will look towards is the government. So if you have infrastructure, if you have quality education in Liberia, for example, when I was at the University of Liberia, my friends, they probably said somewhere else, but they didn't look at me as a Mandingo person. At the Bishop Julia High School, where I was student leader, my friends didn't look at me as a Mandingo person. And my administration was one of the most productive in the history of that school. So why is that? Education. So the government needs to invest in quality, not just education, not just building school buildings here and there, but quality education. So what kind of education is out there now, right? So you have a country which is what is it now? 4.5 million, 5 million, whatever. I don't know if half of the Liberian population is literate. I don't think so. So that in itself is a problem. So you need an educated majority that will be able to make good decisions. I think that's what you saw. The government has to lead on this issue of ensuring that tribalism is not part of our culture. For example, if you and I work together, you don't have to like me, but we can work together. Here in the United States, there are laws against discrimination. There are laws against hate crime. But what do you have in Liberia? This is what we do every day. We talk about, the American Liberians. We talk about how, in some instances we will say, they are the founders. But then you say, well, they don't belong here. and then within the the indigenous ethnic group themselves, there is subdivisions of, well, so and so doesn't belong here. This person is from Sierra Leone. This person is from Guinea. This person is from, Ivory Coast, and so on and so forth. And I posed a question during one of the segment on Focus on Liberia last time. I asked if any one of us on the forum, have ancestors who didn't come from somewhere. And, rightfully so, no one responded to it because there is this, somehow we suspend realization that, all of a sudden nobody came from somewhere. We all came from somewhere, right? So we start with that. And finally, this is what I want to say. So before the Civil War, Samuel Doe, Mr. Doe was warned by someone from Nimba County, by a chief named Jerry Guanya. Jerry Guanya is Gio. Jerry Guanya went to Samuel Doe and warned Samuel Doe that there was about to be an invasion of Liberia from Ivory Coast. Mr. Doe commissioned Edward Komosako, who is a Mandingo, a minister of internal affairs, who is a Mandingo. Edward Komosako went to the border, investigated, came back, and told Mr. Doe that the Nimba people are for you, Mr. President. They are not against you. So if you see where I'm going with this, so the Guillaume said, my people are coming. And Mr. President, I need you to do something. They're going to destabilize this country. But the Mandingo man said, no, Mr. President, forget it. Trust me, they're not doing anything. But what happened? When these guys came, when the MPFR came, the very first target of elimination were Mandingos. I have people today, to this day, who said that Mandingos were the ones responsible for government soldiers killing their people. I mean, so do you see to all of this? So we had a Guillaume man who said, Mr. President, do something about this. And then the Mandingo man said, no, Mr. President, please, this thing is not true. So how is it then that the Mandingos became target of the MPFR? And up to this day, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of our Guillaume friends still believe, including most educated ones, that the Mandingos were responsible for whatever atrocities that the government committed in Nimba County. So this is how tribal we are.
Right, and that speaks to the senselessness of the Liberian Civil War. But we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be right back. And when we come back, we're going to talk about political tribalism.
I do not think a war crimes code for Liberia will be the best thing. We are a very small country made up of less than maybe 4 million persons. And the interrelatedness of the families are so tight. If you drag one person to court, the families that are attached, it will just have a ripple effect.
Ladies and gentlemen, parents and guardians, here comes the biggest opportunity to send your kids to school. The Vision School System, located in PHU Zone Community, presents tuition-free school for a semester. A Vision School System, commonly known as Vision Academy, the entrance fees is just $350 Liberian, while registration fees are in different categories. Registration commences on July of this year and school kicks off September 2021. At Vision School System, commonly known as Vision Academy, you can pick up your entrance.
All right, we are back. Welcome back. Now it's time to talk about political tribalism. And let's look at this definition. Somebody defines that. They say political tribalism is where loyalty to the political tribe is more important than loyalty to anything else. It means that tribe members will go to any length to defend their tribe's leader. And I want to give you, I don't know if you can see this clearly, but an example of political tribalism in America. Because you see, tribalism is not altogether bad, right? Because we see a high level of tribalism in our sport team. That's why you support a team, right? And no matter how they beating your Manchester, you're still there because you are devoted to that political tribe, which is your sport team. So political tribalism exists everywhere. It is the extent at which this disrupt or interfere with the political system. That's where it becomes bad. So here in America, especially during the Trump era, we have a form of tribalism and what we call, so this guy wrote about that and called it the hidden tribes, the hidden political tribes of America. He talked about the progressive activists, the traditional liberals, the passive liberals, the politically disengaged, the moderate, the traditional conservatives, and the devoted conservatives. These groups he turned to be the political tribe. In Liberia, what do we have? And that is the crux of the discussion right now. So in political tribe, it could be an ethnic group, it could be a class, it could be anything else. Let me start with Joseph Jokai from Lofa County. I don't know if Lofa is a political tribe, but Jokai, what do you make of this whole idea of political tribalism in Liberia? Does it exist? In which form? And what are some of the manifestations?
It does, and I will start off by saying that the measure of political tribalism in Liberia is so entrenched to the extent that it's difficult to measure the size, because people don't really consider policies to be the basis for their support to a candidate or to a political party or to a particular political ideology. No. Basically, they are tied to individuals or political institutions based on their tribal connections. We have so many examples around, and we'll probably talk about that later because I see that you have it as a line.
No, go ahead. Talk about the examples.
Yeah, you will not easily take Prince Johnson away from the people in Nimba. You will not easily take Joseph Boakai away from the people in Lofa. Yeah. There are reasons for supporting Boakai. They don't go beyond seeing him as an uncle traditionally and as somebody who they believe they owed that debt of political support to. In Nimba County, they won't just abandon Prince Johnson, no matter the extent to which you talk about atrocities that he committed during the Civil War and his role in many of our crisis situations in the country. No, that won't help. They're not looking at the policy, proposals he's making at the legislature and his contribution to enacting statutes that will contribute to economic development or the education sector, a revitalization of the sector. No, it's going to be about who is he to them. They are kingsmen. They have to support him. Cummings, who just came yesterday in a political limelight, you may also want to consider some degree of support from his kingsmen from the Southeast. If you look at George Weah, you will not easily take away the support. If you look at the last data from the Elections Commission, the Southeastern region, I mean, that was a sweep. And many of the people who voted was now on the basis of George Weah political or corporate leadership experience, reflected by any demonstrative action in that respect. But because, I mean, he's their son largely. And if you look at the younger folks in the country, many of them are sports enthusiasts. They will not tell you that it's on the basis of George Weah's own leadership capabilities demonstrated in different sectors that they voted for him. Some of them just had that natural love from the sporting perspective as an outcome. So in Liberia, largely people make political decisions voting for people to elective positions in our country on the basis of who they are to the person and what is to benefit as well. And if you want to look at the ramification of that is undermining our system, the justice system, because you have to hold on to your political stronghold. As a president, for example, if a group of people are supporting you from a social organization or from your ethnic group, that undermines the rule of law. You have to support them, even if the law has to go against them. You have to circumvent the laws. You have to undermine certain systems to satisfy them, to reach out to them. It's affecting us in several ways. So yes, political tribalism in Liberia is for real. We can't ignore it.
Mr. Cooney, you're a crewman. The president is a crewman. Is that tribalism? That's why you support him. Is it political tribalism for a crew person like you to support the president?
Now I see where the fanaticism comes from. Okay. I will deal with it in due course.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooney.
The good thing is I was a crewman before he became president, and I will remain a crewman until he leave the office. So it's really immaterial. But maybe we need to ask the questions, in another way. Why do we have these bitter tribal fight? What are some of the underlying reasons? And sometimes I do a little pushback on the way Westerners define concepts that relate to us that they don't understand, and they try to demonize those concepts. Like, for example, tribalism, family. They demonize our family system because we got an aspect of it that is polygamous, but they want us to accept their system with something they call alternative lifestyle. Our system should be bad, or their own alternative lifestyle should be good. So I'm a little bit skeptical sometimes when I'm dealing with this. We have to accept that.
And Mr. Cooney, let me clarify. When we talk about political tribalism, we're not actually talking about ethnicity, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. So
the political tribalism you talk about, even in the West, what is it for? Most of the fight that goes into the political tribalism in the West is over the economic power, economic resources. There are people here in America that feel that other people that are not part of their tribe is taking the piece of the cake. Foreigners are coming and being well off, taking away from them those who belong here. If you go to Liberia, let me go to Liberia for example. I don't want us to assume that almost every support that people gave people is based on a tribe, it's for a tribal reason.
No.
Can we also ask, maybe except for economic reason? I'm supporting Joker because Joker is only that he's from our tribe. But when Joker gets there, I get closer to the economic power that is in the country. And so this is why these kind of fights will continue if we don't look at the structure of government. If we don't reimagine government in a way that people in the various regions of the country will empower themselves and do things for themselves, so that we can all beautifully celebrate our tribe. Don't you see how we celebrate our tribe during county meet? Do you see fighting? We all celebrate one another. But because the economic piece is being taken to Monrovia, it is Monrovia that get that part. Everybody wants that part. So every tribe is looking at their tribal person that is closer to that part. The closer the tribal person get to that part, they think that their chances of having a piece of the part increases. This part is being kept in Monrovia. I'm talking about breaking up this part, dividing it to the rest of the country. Let us share revenue in an equitable way. Let the people of Liberia in their various communities develop themselves so that we can reduce this tribal fighting we have. Because the person that is celebrating in Sano County is not just the ethnic pride, it's the fact that, the president is from here, maybe something will drop from the president. That may be a motivating factor. But if we have a system of government where the resources of the country are equitably distributed across the country, where we don't have that ridiculous $200,000 that sits with some powerful person in Monrovia that our county superintendent will have to beg and stay 3 months in Monrovia before they can get $20,000. If we don't change that kind of system of governance, we will continue to talk these things. So our people are not troubled because they want to be troubled. That's the point I'm making. They're troubled because supporting a troubled man maybe increase your chance of getting to the economic part.
Thank you. And
people want piece of the pie.
Let me come to a call because I was listening to a podcast on polarization and political tribalism. And this is what the guy said, that some of the reason for this is number one, frustration with the economy. And two, the elite class is detached from the people. The elites are failed. And so there is a distrust or mistrust in the system. The second reason is the influence of sensationalism from our media. And then the third one, he said, the access to endless information feed from extreme groups. So if you wanted to find a reason, for instance, that a COVID vaccine is a hoax, you can find people on the internet who support that. So you get tons of information for whatever strange and awkward belief you want is there. So if we look at these reasons, how do you look at these reasons as it relates to Liberia as to why we have this polarization or political tribalism?
So the first thing, do you mind if I address this issue of decentralization? So Mr. Cooney is talking about...
Is that related to
yes, it is.
tribalism?
It is, because this hyper emphasis, this hyper focus on decentralization is basically code for deunification. And it is this idea that we want to control our own group. You know, this is the polar opposite of what we actually need. This hyper decentralization of a very small country, putting things. So what happens right now in Liberia is a hybrid government. Liberia is not established or founded like a federation, because it's not, right? We're more modeled after a single state. We have counties, and the counties, you know, you elect your representatives to the legislature. So to say that everything is happening in Monrovia, each county has representatives and senators in the central government. So to pretend that there's people, foreign people, that you don't have right or power to elect your own people to represent your interests is not correct. They're just not very smart, and they're not very effective. But it doesn't mean that the structure is bad. It means that the choices that we're making are bad. And we're making these choices sometimes based on, oh, this person's grandfather was paramount chief. And even though the guy is wicked and selfish, we're still going to send him because this person's grandfather was the one who brought our town, 80 years ago, or brought some mission to our community 80 years ago. That's what happens, right? Or during the war, this person helped to liberate us. So this hyper function or emphasis on decentralization is a manifestation of tribalistic thinking. Even though you have representatives, you have senators, we want to be so tribalistic that we don't even want our own government we don't trust our own government to properly allocate resources. So we want to literally have little countries within a country, which is exactly what Liberia has been fighting for the last 100+ years to get away from, which is to unify the country and to go into the interior districts and bring them on board and have them buy into Liberianness. Tribalism exists because of lack of education. The function of government in education is to socialize people into being citizens. The function of government in education is to socialize people into being citizens of the country first. Liberian education system has failed miserably at this. They think education is about reading and writing and literacy. It is not. In the United States, from the time a child is 2-3 years old in preschool and daycare, they're being socialized to be good citizens. Wait your turn, Johnny. Be nice, Johnny. Be kind. Everybody share. They start molding the brains of human beings to think of themselves as Americans before they can even speak. I have 4 children. I've watched this. In Liberia, it's not happening. If it was happening, people could move from any part of Liberia to any other part of Liberia and feel at home. I live in Georgia. There are many people in Georgia that were born in Ohio, in New York. They move to Georgia, they become Georgians. Liberia, this hyper, I'm Mr. Cooney, I don't mean to pick on you, but all I heard in your espousing of this need for decentralization, it sounded so tribalistic to me. Because that's the basis of it. That's the foundation of this hyper need to separate from the central government and return to our ancestral ways. And next thing we'll start, Grable and Crew people will go back to the Grable Crew wars, and the Pele and Mono people will start fighting each other again. The Loma and Kisi and Madinga will start fighting in Lofa. I mean, come on.
And we're going to have a separate discussion on decentralization.
So we're talking about tribalism and political polarization. This is what we're talking about. And I need to express this because I think everybody's beating around the bush. Another thing that occurred during this conversation we've had is that Mohammed Sharif said that one Madingo man went to Doe and said, hey, they're not coming to invade. So because one human being does something, he must somehow represent the actions of all Madingo people. That is tribalism. Because it's ridiculous to think that because one Madingo man did something that you think is right, it absolves any other Madingo person from doing something that's wrong. Like in 1985, when many Madingo people were leading those soldiers into villages and little corners and pointing out where people were and having them killed. This is a fact. So this is not something, we can sit and pretend about. Likewise, just because some very bad people led those soldiers and helped them massacre people in Nimba does not mean that every Madingo person is guilty of the act. These are all things where human beings, individual actions of an individual person are ascribed to their ethnicity, to their tribe, to their group. It is absolutely based on ignorance. And we're socialized in this way. And it's wrong, and we need to be conscious of it, and we need to call it out and point it out every time we see it. That being said, we talk about political polarization. Tribalism replaces ideology when there's no education. Because when you're hungry and you're not educated, your tribe becomes your survival mechanism. It is an archaic remnant from our ancestors. We form these little tribal groups. You have to band together to survive. And so when you're hungry and you're desperate and you don't have a lot of time to sit and develop your thoughts and your ideas because most of your leisure time is spent looking for food or fighting for survival, you're going to cling to your tribe. Because that is what fills the vacuum of ignorance, is tribalism. So philosophy and ideology is a luxury. It is not something that you develop on an empty stomach. George Bernard Shaw says, morals are a luxury of the rich. What does that mean? Morals are a luxury of the rich. George Bernard Shaw was saying that when you're wealthy, your stomach is full, you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. You can sit and develop your ideological beliefs. You do this in university. This is a luxury of the elite. If you're basically spending day-to-day trying to survive, all you're thinking about is a bag of rice.
Right. And so, let me interrupt you a little bit because you were saying you are tying education with tribalism, right?
Of
Political
course.
tribalism exists here in the United States, where the literacy rate is way up there.
Yes. So it's not the same as in Liberia. What happens in America is not analogous to what happens in Liberia at all, right? So in the United States, you have white privilege and people trying to protect their privilege. They're very conscious. There's a lot of ignorant, uneducated people in America too, okay? So ignorance and miseducation and poor thinking and feeble-mindedness are not unique to Africa or poor countries. But for the most part, these people have an ideological belief, and it's founded in white supremacy. They believe in the supremacy of their whiteness over other people. So that is one thing. And then there's others who are thinking people who say, hey, you know what, that's not right. We think differently. So essentially, America's divide is really about keeping the status quo, where you have undue privilege based on things that you cannot control, like the color of your skin and your ancestral history, versus you know, the people who are saying all people are equal, all people should be given equal opportunities. In Liberia, that is not what the division is about. You've got people who are too hungry to even think and plan or think about, envision what the world should be like. All they know is they need, their immediate needs are not met.
Thank you.
One last thing to tie to this. Political tribalism is extremely destructive and dangerous. It is not productive. It doesn't produce anything. Most of the liberation movements in the world, in places like Cuba, Upper Volta that became Burkina Faso, it has always been wealthy elites that have brought about social changes in their country. It has never been bottom up. And why is that? Because Thomas Sankara was rich, he was educated, he was sent all around the world to go to school, he was able to come home with new ideas and mobilize the masses. Same thing with Fidel Castro, rich plantation owner's son. He got socialized, conscientized, and he awakened Cuba and had a revolution. If you look at Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, these were not people who grew up in poverty. These were people that had the luxury of world-class education. Liberia has not reached that stage yet. We suppress those thinking people. We consider them to be different from us, and we don't allow them to come in and interject new thoughts and new ideas.
Thank you. Mohammed.
Yeah.
Let's Mohammed go.
Okay.
Mohammed, you have commented on the political tribalism issue, right? Did you?
Okay. So there are several issues to address there. I just want to say that, you know, going back to a statement that I just heard, and it's something that I've heard even from, you know, some of the learned people from Nimba County. And what they tell me was, hey, in 1985, there were Mandingo people who were pointing, you know, out our people for the Dole soldiers to kill, right? They don't have any evidence to make these sweeping generalizations. These are things that are very unproductive. They are counterproductive to peace and stability. They don't help us. They harm us. And this is the reason why we are where we are, right? Because if my father did something, then, you know, the sins of my father, I inherit the sins of my father. Basically, that's what we do in Liberia. And that's why we are where we are. Second, so Carl mentioned again something about, you know, decentralization is not necessary. Well, we've tried centralization for 174 years. Where has that led us? Right? You have presidents who are appointing superintendents. Okay, what has that done for us? So yes, there's a need for some level of decentralization. Decentralization doesn't mean, you know, obsessive ethnocentrism. What we have now is untenable. You have a powerful central authority sitting in Monrovia on Capitol Hill, basically controlling hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in some instances. And the wealth does not trickle down to the poor rural masses. If that's not elitism, then what is it? So we have from 1847 to 1980, from 1980 to 2021, the same old order. It's untenable. We got to get rid of it, right? So Mr. George mentioned something, and I was shaking my head the whole time. He mentioned that Liberia doesn't even have a sewage processing plant. This is a 174-year-old country. Monrovia, I think he mentioned Monrovia doesn't have it. So if Monrovia doesn't have it, you damn sure know that Kilipo doesn't have it. Okay, Zwedru doesn't have it. So this is what we're talking about. We're not, these are real issues. I grew up in the rural area, unlike some of you guys. Okay, so I saw poverty. I saw degradation. I saw people, Dennis, walk from Kilipo. I saw students walk from Kilipo to Wleboken and back and forth to school. Wleboken is behind Kalipo. Wleboken is several miles away from Kalipo, right? So the students will walk in the creek. So if you got to the creek, you have to take off your uniform and walk through the creek. Okay? This is what we're talking about. Development has not reached that part of the world. And meanwhile, we have the president sitting in Monrovia. We have, and it's not George Weah. I'm talking about presidents before Weah, presidents before Doe. We have all these people sitting in Monrovia. We have parliament sitting in Monrovia. Those guys are the richest people in Liberia, and they're sitting there, and the people of Wlebo can have no roads. The people of Sibo can have no roads.
We're going to have a separate discussion on decentralization because it seems to be a very important subject that we need to discuss. But before we to what extent has the absence of these institutions, I think it was like 6-7 years ago, I wrote that sometime because these institutions are not available, we don't even have real political parties. So the fallback position is our ethnic groups. And we saw that during the war where everybody, because there's no law to protect the rights and privileges of people. So you have the Grebo Defense Force, the Loma Defense Force, the Mandingo Defense Force, and all the people fell back to their tribal positions.
And why is that? That's because you don't have a sacrosanct legal institution. There's no legal framework that protects the minority. Where is the judicial system that protects my right, your rights? You don't have that. What you have is money. The highest bidders are purchasing justice. Okay? So you don't have the justice system. And that is something that we need. So beyond anything else, this is something that we need. This is something that Chair Chipo talks about, and he advocated, and he suffered for it. And that's what we're talking about here. These are real issues. And I'm not just sitting here on focus on Liberia and making statements just because I want to appear on your show. For me, these are real issues. For me, these are life and death issues. As we speak, there are people right now who have no food in places like Kalipo. They have no roads. They have no running water. They have no toilets. People go to the bushes. How is the central government sitting in Monrovia allowing these things to continue after 174, 75 years? It's a crime. It's unjust. And this country ought to be ashamed of themselves. These leaders ought to be ashamed of themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Before I go to Tule there, that reminds me of what happened this week in Monrovia. The mother-in-law of my cousin died. Why? She was being given oxygen at JFK, and during that time, guess what? Lights went off.
Oh my God.
She died. And not only her, the 3 other persons that my cousin knows that are one of them, her former teacher from AGM, also died because the lights went off. I said that was murder. Because how can you operate on people if you don't have even 2 gallons of gasoline or gas at standby? But Mr. Tule, and that's very tragic. My hearts go out to my in-law.
It's not you, it's me. Yeah, that was the one that started, bro.
So George, your political party, Councillor Bromskin said they were going to beat Dumb Boy in the executive mansion. We can see that clearly it's mainly Bassa people.
Okay.
Hold on, let me finish. I know I talk about Liberty Party, so you want to jump on me, but wait.
It's out of context. That's the reason why I wanted to correct that.
Yeah, you'll correct that when you have your chance. Most of the people supporting or that were raising money for Brownie Samuka came from Lofa because they say this is our son. PLO Lumumba said we own our thieves. At one point when Milton Tiaje was being accused by the LACC of corruption, I wrote something, on the listserv, and one of a prominent, a senior colleague from Sino County called me and said, Dennis, that Tiaje one you see, he is our other people are stealing. So if Tiaje will steal that money, and takes that to Sino to develop Sino, that's good for us. What's your take on political tribalism based on the premise that I laid, Mr. Tula?
Okay. Yeah, but two things here. Before I come to your question, I want to establish something with my brother Sharif. Sharif, instead of just sitting on river and trying to wonder why the relationship with the Mandingos and the other tribes in three major counties, Nimba, Bong, and Lofa, is so tenuous, is so teetering on the brink of conflict every moment. I went to go and find out. At first, I went to the Africaners section of the UL library to see if they had any material on that. And then I read, one of the things I read was because I want to go back into the history. Chief Boozy, where they call the man who they named the Loma people after. They said when you see yes, somebody say Boozy man, Boozy man, because there was a chief from the Zozo, the Giziman tribe called Boozy, and he fought with a very powerful Mandingo chief for a very, very long time. What I found out, and let me before disclosure here, my grandfather was half Mandingo, half Loma. So my father had that heritage, and his mom was Loma. So okay, so I really wanted to find out why. And then I worked in Bond County for a year, and I interviewed the old people. I went on Banga Broad Street, met the old chief, and sat down with him and asked him some questions. What I found out is deeper. The issue between the Mandingos and the Nima County people predates the war, predates 1980. They were just looking for means to settle scores. Let me put it that way. And the reason why is because the domineering way that Mandingos existed with these tribes left a sour taste that have permeated generations. I'll be honest with you. They took the children of these people as wives, and they did not allow these people to marry their daughters. Okay, that's one of the issues. Also, again, they live just like the way the Jews would live. They live outside of the society. They live special away from the society. And then they took lands. They were given to usury. They borrowed money and they exacted interest. All these things made them to exist in it was always a conflicting existence between Mandingos and these tribes. So as you progress through in Lofa, for instance, it was all about medicine. Let me tell you now. It was all about medicine in Lofa. They say the Mandingo man medicine stronger than the Loma man medicine. So the result, the Mandingo man had undue he took advantage of the people. Let me put it that way. I know what I'm talking about because I interviewed my great uncles in Vezala to find out what some of these things happening from my mom's side. And I heard all these different stories, and I'm telling you. So when you see what happened during the war, it was like somebody said, maybe it's time for me to get back at this man for what he did. But then again, it wasn't just in the absence of that, because 1985, what Paul and Lusto happened. It is not in vacuum, it happened. Okay? And what happened with Lord and Yumo K, like in Lofa, for instance. These things happen. How do we move on from these things? We cannot write, you myself cannot go and erase the things that happened in the past. But what we can do now is to see how we can coexist on a realistic basis. How we one another as Liberians and say, okay, the sins of the past are the sins of the past. If I wrong you, I should be able to say sorry so that we can move forward. Instead of me holding my position, you wrong me, I wrong you, and we can never get anywhere. So this thing is another discussion we can have another day about the historicity of this thing. But when it comes to the question he asked,
and you have 30 seconds now because you use your time.
No problem. It can even be 1 second. Okay. The issue here is this: as much as we want to divorce ourselves from the tribal leanings and say this is just who we are, the first thing we do is I'm a crew man before I'm a Liberian. To change the narrative, we have to start teaching our children. You are Liberian before you are crew. You are Liberian before you are a Loma man. Okay, it comes with education. It comes with knowledge. It comes with people, our people deciding. You know, I always say this. We have not decided on what we want as a people, as an entire nation. We don't know what we want. We have never, Mohammed, we never sat on a table of brotherhood and say, look, 16 tribes that are diametrically opposed. They have different cultural leanings and practices. But we got born together. We did not decide to be born Liberians. This is where we are. We fit in these geographical confines. What do we want as a people and how do we get there? Those are the questions we need to ask. What do we want? Because we don't have a Liberian dream, like what we talked about. The Americans have an American dream, and they feed it into these children from the time they are small. Every one of them aspire. What do our children aspire to be? Okay, how can we communicate a sense of nationalistic devotion to that country? Okay, the first thing, how can we even do that when we don't even have our small plant in an entire nation of over 5 million?
You come back to this sewage plant.
No, the reason why I'm seeing is just look, listen, there are certain things. Let me tell you something. One of the contracts I've done here, I have been repairing old sewage plants. And the company I work for, that's what I do. I used to travel from since the lockdown stopped, travel from place to place all across the province of Ontario, repairing sewer and water treatment plant. Let me tell you something. Within the city, the people will come and post up a notice up and say, if you do not change your under drains, we will shut down your sewer plant. They've seen city people, the environmental people telling the people, if you don't change your under drains, we'll shut down your sewer plant. There's a reason for this. Because these things are very important. Who knows? They are very important to the existence of our people. It's very, very important. We cannot exist as a nation without these things. So we need to come to a place and say, this is what we want as a people. This is what we agree on. We put our fighting, our divisions, our polarizations, our differences aside, and we see how we can work. And
thank you, Josh. Thank you. Let me get one last comment from Joe Kai, and then we go to our comments. Time is way. Joe, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dennis. I just wanted to say that no matter our approaches, our different approaches in underscoring the effects of political tribalism in Liberia, all points to weakening our governance systems, our institutions, promoting corruption, promoting nepotism, and entrenching deprivation, segregation. And all of those vices. At the end of the day, you just found one group of people who will continue to enjoy the wealth of the nation while the rest of the people languish in poverty. So that's the extent to which political tribalism is dangerous. But I wanted to differ a little bit with Cole when she equated political tribalism to the point that Wema was stressing initially about decentralization. It is a known fact that Monrovia is the National Service Center. Monrovia is where almost everything in the country happens. People come from the Leeward counties to come to Monrovia for services. That should not be the case. And I don't think decentralization in this context is actually going to be based on people having independence of governance in the counties, like in a federation. I'm not sure that's the context. I think the context here is about devolution of certain powers so that the people can have the right to decision making about their own livelihoods in the locales where they live. In places like Sierra Leone, they do election for council members. It could be security, it could be social justice across the country during the electoral period. Those people have the right to certain decision making when it comes to governance in a country. In Liberia, we still have superintendents that are appointed by the president, and they should be having a greater responsibility in leading the counties. So can we have them to have a certain authority to be able to make decisions on the resources in the areas that they control, that will ban elected representatives and senators to be able to sit with them to make such decisions, and not just make those decisions on their behalf without any form of consultation or without them being involved in a serious way in the decision-making process. I think it's decentralization in this context. It's not necessarily about having a form of federation that will further promote political tribalism. I'm not sure it's from that perspective. So I just wanted to indicate that.
Thank you. And hey, come back. We're going to have a separate discussion on decentralization. And let's go to a few comments, and then we can have our final statement on solutions. This one is from Aldo Dixon. He said there is nothing called political tribalism. Tribalism is just tribalism. So Mr. Dixon is missing the point. Tribalism is different. When we say political tribalism, we're talking about the devotion to these little groups. It could be the diaspora or the American. How you going to call us now? Those of us who are in America, we go back. We are a different class of people, and so maybe there's a group there. So it's that kind of thing that we're talking about.
We were on the support call for president, so that's our inclination.
Away from everyone else's opinion.
I'll back you.
And put the Liberia situation in a better, understandable, and relatable perspective. That lady, I think, and he made a call. Kude is saying this is very interesting, very interesting program. Kude, you can only get that from Focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Isakova tribalism has compromised our people independence. Jimmy Eastman said, ballot-driven politics, no ideology, values, or principles, just leveraging their affinity for their own exploits. Polarization is ideological. My sister, call you getting some praises here. Jimmy is saying good points, Mrs. Kamula. Propo King show called no understanding of their own position, mixture of left, right, center, liberalism, socialism. They just go with the flow. Sam Wallow say, Salif did not participate in debate. So why didn't Liberty Party legislator carry forward those initiatives? Question for you, Mr. Tule. Danny Phillips said to suggest that Liberia's leaders do not espouse a vision dream is totally insulting. Just because Ghana and Rwanda are more developed does not mean that others do not have dreams. What's about innovation? Why can't Liberians innovate? George, you're writing here too. Okay. Someone say that's just a perception and a dangerous one. Making unfounded allegation with no evidence. You need to stop that. I don't know what exactly is making
talking about.
Dr. Gompu said, Mr. Joker, why did you talk about during your candidacy? Did you focus on the issues and ideas that motivated your campaign? It looked like somebody wanted to take something from your playbook to run.
Dr. Gompu, hello. One of the great things.
Want to stop from vying for the presidency, Dave is asking. He continues, I don't think Liberia's problem is about tribalism, but high degree of incompetence and misplacement of people. These are two of the comments. Let me read this last one from Martin Brown. What I observe about Liberian politics is that it is all about self-glorification. Politics in Liberia, individuals driven to, so to speak. The reason is because those that run for public offices are not holistic in their approach. Self or I has taken the center stage in our body politics. Those are a few of your comments, and a few of the comments from our viewers. We want to appreciate them, or that keep more and more comment, but we're not able to read all of them. So we just stop. John Maulo say you cannot decentralize an illiterate and poor country. Let's not just do wishful thinking. Real national education is what we lack. Dr. Gompu said Monrovia is detached from most of the rest of the counties. Moving the capital city to a central point in the country will help to make government more responsive to the needs of the people. Dr. Gompo is introducing another ideas. Those are our comments. I want us to conclude with 2 minutes each, a little reaction to the comments, and the way forward when we talk about political tribalism. How can we stop it? Political polarization. How can we improve things? So let's go around the room. You can take 1 minute for the comment and for the comments, and another minute to summarize, and let's conclude. Let me start with George this time.
The reality here is that we are a deeply divided nation at every level. And one of the ways that we can be able to go past our divisions and our polarization is to come together and focus our energy on ideologies. The kind of ideology that will translate the lives of our people from the sedentary or subsistent existence into something where everyone can be actively involved economically in Liberia. It is a problem, and because of that, we are lagging behind across all developmental indexes. We are way we. I can always say, we're not even on the road to consider us before you say we're going somewhere. We stay like a car parked without tires. That's how Liberia looks to me, because we do not have a central ideology. We have not determined what we want as a people. So everyone comes and starts his own thing. A new chapter starts. He doesn't say, let me continue from where my opponent or my predecessor left off so that we can translate this nation to greater heights. No, because then they start focusing on few capital projects where they can get kickbacks, and they leave advancing the material well-being of the ordinary Liberian is never at the fore. It's always an afterthought. If I finish chopping anything, they get out of their business. And that mentality affects everything that we do in Liberia. Until we can change that, we are not going anywhere. So all we can say, we need to change, and that change starts with us preferring the next person before ourselves.
Call.
Yeah, so we have to organize before we decentralize. And the government is already very much politically decentralized. That's why you have representatives and senators and elected officials that go to argue in the interest of the population. The problem, again, goes back to education. They're selecting the wrong people. Budgetary allocations are determined by the legislature, not the president. So this idea to get one president sitting there, it is the lawmakers, it's the House of Representatives, that is going to approve budgets and going to determine how much of the resources go this place or that place. You've got county development funds. The small counties are overly funded with compared to the larger counties because they have more representation, more allocated funds. But the people they elect play in the money. They don't actually use the money for its intended purpose. So if you decentralize, it's going to be the same thing. You have corrupt mentality, selfish mentality, people incompetence, lack of skill and ability, so they just resort to the usual corruption because they don't know how to. If you don't know how to do something, you just go there and loot. So there's a vicious cycle. So this pushing for decentralization without talking about having a national vision, a big future picture to build the country, turn this group of nations into one nation, into citizens. I started this off, and this is where I'm going to summarize. We are out of many different people. We have become, through history and circumstances and the sheer will and determination of our ancestors to remain sovereign and pass this legacy of land sovereignty. We may not be economically sovereign, we may not be even politically sovereign, but we have what's called land sovereignty. And that is the most powerful tool that Liberia has to restore its future. Every inch of the country belongs to the citizens. It is the only country on the planet that every inch of land is owned by Africans. There's nowhere else in the world that can claim that. And this is powerful if we understand what we have to our advantage, if we utilize the tools we have, educate our citizens, share the knowledge, make sure that we have a curriculum review board, people who get together, brilliant people like Dr. Gompu, and others, Dr. Dunn, come together and put together a national curriculum for Liberians by Liberians. For lack of a better word, a unification curriculum. Teach our children, ourselves, what we were not taught, what some of us had to discover on our own. That is the only way to move forward. And that's the only way to unite and become Liberians, all of us, equally.
Thank you. There's a comment here. Seata say, Mrs. Famula, it is not too late to throw your hat in the race for 2023.
The race for what?
President.
Look at, I think I laughed at that comment when I saw it.
And Martin Brown said, Dennis, I strongly believe that political tribalism play a major role in our body politics. The late Councillor Bromskin, Prince Johnson, and Ambassador Boaka are clear examples of political tribalism. They are voted because of their tribal affiliations. Why do you think people of Bome felt abandoned by Madame Salif? Because they voted her continuously as their daughter. Mohammed.
Yeah, so it's not sufficient for me to just talk about these things, to just appear on this show and other shows, say, let's unite, let's put aside our differences. I believe that I am an epitome of unification, right? I have friends, right, who are of different religious background, different tribal background. Here am I in the United States. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about looking back to my elementary school in again and making sure that, I do something for the poor students, the poor teachers who don't even get their paycheck timely, to do something for them. So it's not sufficient for me, right, as a Liberian, as an African, to just talk about unification, just talk about, putting aside differences. I have set examples from when I was a child, and this is something I will continue to do. Having said that, I have to speak to the issues that are still going on in this 175-year-old country. The country is still divided on tribal lines. Polarization, I didn't agree with that, but there is a lot of, division along tribal lines in Liberia. And going back to, one of the points that I made about decentralization, maybe some of the panelists, are thinking when we talk about decentralization, you're going to move, the mention to Kong County, or you're going to move Parliament to Zwedru. How about, and that's not what I'm talking about. How about building good schools in Zwedru? How about building a junior college in Kalipo? How about building a university in Bepo Kawikan? Those are the things I'm talking about. How about building a high school in Sibokan? And I'm not just giving you names. I'm not taking names out of the hat. These are real towns and villages that people live in that have been forgotten by the central authority in Monrovia sitting on Capitol Hill. It is not enough for me, for these guys that, that are elected, who are mostly in Monrovia. Where do these guys vacation? I see them here in Philadelphia. The representatives that you elect, they come here in Philadelphia on vacation when they should be back to their constituencies. So this is what I'm talking about, right? It should be decentralized in a way where who is the executive of a county? It's the superintendent. The superintendent should be elected by the people of that county. Okay, the representative, members of the House of Representatives, should have their constituency headquarters, offices in their constituency. How many of them do? They don't. So when we talk about decentralization, you start with building schools, elementary schools, all around the country. You start with building good roads. There are no roads now. In the rainy season, there are two seasons in Liberia when I grew up. It was the dry season, the rainy season where you can't travel, which is the wet season. What kind of country you will have now if your citizens can't even travel? So that's something that the administration can do, this administration can do. that past administrations failed to do. That's a form of decentralization, because if your people can travel, if they can sell their merchandise to farms, to market, from farm to market, to towns and villages, then now you are bringing development to these people. In most places, there are no clean water, right? So when we talk about decentralization, these are the things that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about moving the executive mansion to Zwedru. I'm not talking about moving, Parliament building, or, the Supreme Court to Greenville. I'm talking about actually bringing development, bringing the poor masses on board development. So if, if we don't agree on that, then I don't think we will have a country for the next 200 years. It's still going to be what it is, because current status quo is untenable.
Thank you. Another comment here, Budu Doise, native presidents always fail Liberia. Let me go to Jokai, your closing comments.
Look, Dennis, I think this is going to be the third.
Before you come out, there's a, for Propo Kinsey, second time listening to Jokai, he will have been a good representative. He want to give you the Dewell Trophy.
Well, well, yeah. That's it. But let me say here that I think this show will be the second or third in which I've repeatedly said that the way to address these governance and political and economic issues that we have in our country will be to address the education issue. We need to reform our education sector. And I've always said that there are two approaches. Academically, we need to review and reorganize the content of our education. But that you have to look at every layer of the ladder, the education ladder, from early childhood development to tertiary education. We need to place emphasis on technical and vocational education, producing men and women who are ready for the job market. Right. You need to develop a curriculum that is job creation driven. You need to look at the sciences. You need to look at technology. You know how many times, how many persons have done a business administration at the University of Liberia? So many of them, no jobs. What did you do? I did accounting. What did you do? I did administration, business administration. I did management. And we continue to produce people, cycle after cycle, in areas, in fields that are not relevant to what corporate institutions do you have in Liberia? What industrial organization do you have that you're producing managers, you need to produce people with technical expertise, people who will contribute to nation building in that respect. The other side of it is that a very good number of Liberians still see government as a group of people who are doing them favor.
Yes.
And the reason is that they don't understand the measure of their citizenship. As citizen of your country, you have a right to hold those people accountable for making sure that they provide the basic social services for you, making sure that they make education accessible and affordable for all, making sure that they make healthcare accessible and affordable, making sure that there are hygiene and sanitation services provided to keep you healthy. Because you cannot have a group of sick people building a productive nation. It's not possible. It's not possible. That's our situation in Liberia. And as we said, these things are difficult because the governments have not taken the responsibility to address these issues. So we don't even have institutions that will guarantee these services for the people. So you need a complete national education system, a process in place. It has to be civic education. We got to embark on it. It got to be continuous, not periodically done. It has to be something that will make Liberians aware of their roles, their responsibilities, and their rights. Exactly. And that's the way we can begin to address the issues that confront us. We can begin to deal with political tribalism in our country, because when people are educated, they don't care. Or what are you, their uncle or their nephew running for position? They want to make sure that you are qualified to be able to deliver consistent with their mandate. it will help to address some of these issues. This is fundamental. So education is fundamental. I've said it repeatedly, and I will always underscore that. Today, I will say the way to address political tribalism in Liberia is to have a national education renewal process in place that will work for the nation, no matter who you are. Once you are a Liberian child, you should be able to get that quality education, that accessible education, that affordable education from your childhood, something that some of us did not benefit from. I heard Mohammed talking about him suffering I was there in Zozo. I went to school. You can imagine distances that we walk and other places, the way we struggle to attain the education. I became a refugee, and that did not stop me from going to school. But you can imagine to be a refugee at the same time you want to acquire education.
Thank you.
We went through it. It was tough, but we managed, to accomplish that goal. But this time around is different. This is 21st century. If you look at the age of our country, we must try to catch up and compete with our contemporaries. We need to do that. And the way we can do it is to invest in education. And government has a greater responsibility to do that because they have the responsibility to allocate and to implement, and they must be able to do that. So today, I just want to say we can deal with political tribalism in Liberia when we invest greatly in education realistically.
Thank you. And you're somewhat agreeing with you here, say Josiah is strong. Budu Dua, who talk about the native presidency, reform the educational system. Dave Jha replied to Budu, say the native president comment is a product of extreme naivety. And I agree. All right. So thank you so much. Because of time, we couldn't get to our Tabata segment, but when we come back next Thursday, we're going to have the Tabata of the week. But I want to thank you all for coming. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock, please, we're going to have the literary hour. And guess what we're talking about? Wilton Sangawolo, the writer, musician, and folklorist. Join Dr. K. Moses Nawe and Jackie Sayer, the Fulbright Scholar, for the literary hour. It comes your way every Friday at 6 p.m. I want to thank you again for your time. Thank you to all our viewers who are watching now, who are going to watch later. Keep your dial set here at Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Whether you believe the country is polarized or not, whether we are divided on tribal lines, whether there's political tribalism, whatever your belief is, we are all Liberians. And every day, the only thing that should keep us awake at night is, how do we make Liberia that glorious land of liberty? How can we go back to the reason why this country was founded? Has the beacon of hope, has an oasis in Africa for all free people. We are all Liberians, and that's the song we leave with you. Good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.